Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with messy perfection entrepreneur or social media consultant Tamay Shannon. Where to Start Marketing was created especially to serve small businesses. Social media doesn't have to be hard, ineffective, or time-consuming, and Tamay takes the overwhelm out of the social media for small businesses. It can be a very instrumental and money-making part of a marketing mix. She's been in business for over 10 years helping small businesses get the brand exposure they deserve without the hassle. Enjoy this interview.
Oh, hey, how are you? Perfect.
I'm wonderful. How are you today?
I am doing well. I cannot complain.
Good. Well, it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out for the program. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So before we get into things and how you roll and what you're doing with your life, I want to know the last 3 years with COVID has been quite a thing. And I'm curious, how did you survive that time period, and how has it changed the way that you live your life and conduct business now?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say how I survived it, honestly, was just how the friends and family that I had, the things that we created, we were doing things like midday yoga and stuff like that. So that's how I survived it. But the biggest takeaway was never in my adult life was there... It happens in other cultures, but in America, there's no siesta. There's no time for not doing anything, and this was a forced stop. Like, there was, like, no, you're not going to go to that event. No, you're not going to go do X. And so it was an opportunity for me to see what rest could look like and how stopping and not doing anything can free up my mind. And what my mind rested looks like is different, right? Like, things become easier, thoughts flow quicker. When I was like, oh, well, instead of like, let me watch TV or let me go do this, it was like, well, I could go take a walk outside. So just getting acquainted with rest and not doing anything. And now for me, that's just an important part to living life, is making sure that I'm not always filling every moment with something, and then not doing anything is a legitimate way to fill your day, to fill your time. It doesn't always have to be quote unquote productive. And so it was an introduction to that for me.
Which I think was probably necessary for a lot of people to kind of recalibrate their lives. So let's get into exactly what you do for a living. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids at a career day, and one of them looks up at you and asks, what do you do for a living? How do you answer that child?
How do I answer that child? Perfect. How I would answer a child is I would literally say, I go on the internet and I have conversations with people such that they would like buy a product or buy a service or be curious about a movement. But I engage in conversation with people online. I use social media to talk to people.
So what is it that you wanted to do when you were in the third grade? What was your dream?
So I never, ever remember. My father was in the military, and so I don't often remember like my dreams from when I was little. I remember like experiences and things that we were doing in life, or, you know, what Christmas was like, and we were having to make it through the airport and things like that. But I was always somebody who was curious about art and creating. Not that I wanted to be an artist, but just the act of creating, whether it was through crayons, whether it was through photography, whether it's through the written word. I'm always curious about creating something that was never there before.
So talk to me a little bit more specifically, you know, based on what you do for a living now, what were some of the seeds from childhood that were planted in you to become who you are, and where were you born and raised?
Born and raised nowhere. So I would say the longest I spent anywhere was in California. I spent 8 years there. But really I had the opportunity to be in Germany and England. And so and then in the South. So I claim the South as part of my sensibilities, but there's not a place where I'm like, born and raised, this is who I am. But I would just claim the South. And so really what I wanted to do then, or what I thought about my sensibilities then, how it contributes to now, I would just say is curiosity. You can't do social media unless you're curious. You just can't, because between the algorithm changing over here or a new way to do something over here, you got to be curious to figure out, well, is there a new way to do something, or can I do something different, or can I refine something? And so I've always been curious about how life works, how things work. Before, when I was in high school, I went to a magnet school. There was an opportunity to specialize, and so I specialized in computers. And I had the opportunity to take down and break down a computer into its component parts and like put it together and make it work again. And I thought that was cool, because I was like, ooh, okay, because up until that point I had only interacted with computers as their final product. Like, you turn it on, you play a game, you're good to go. But never had I been like, oh, here's a motherboard, and oh, here's a graphics card, and oh, they go together to produce this thing. So I would say curiosity, really, for my sensibilities as a kid, just how do things work? How do people work? How does, like, just that sensibility of just giving it a go. And that's how I actually do things now. There's often times where it's like, all right, you could go left or you could go right. And I'm like, I don't know. Let's just do left. And if you ask me why, I'm like, well, I've never done left before, so let's do left. Let's see what happens. So it's just a curiosity about the unknown. It out.
So who's been a consistent role model or a hero for you in your life?
I would absolutely, hands down, have to say my grandparents and thus my parents, just how, and the reason why is how they are with people, their capacity to love on people, support people, is just, for me, like, their hearts are so big. Because I would hear stories of my mom and her siblings talking about when they were growing up, that their house was a neighborhood house. So that's where people would come for after school or to talk on a Friday and review the week, and the adults would play spades and da-da-da-da-da. And so that capacity, I'm just always, like, striving for, how do I have a heart for people? How do I, and it's not a trying to fix people or make them better or anything like that, but really it's where they are now, without changing them, without fixing them, without being like, well, if you just did this thing, da-da-da-da-da-da, but really for where they are now, how do I have a heart for people? How do I engage them and give them grace? Because we all could use, I know I could use a little bit of grace. So just making sure that I can create and give grace to people. So yeah, I would absolutely say my parents, my grandparents, and just their ability to give grace for people.
If you could meet anybody alive on the planet right now, who would it be? Who would you love to meet and talk to?
If I could meet anybody, I would absolutely, I've always been curious. I would have to say, this is probably an odd answer, but the founder of Bitcoin, or the creator, and it's, the why is because to create something, the blockchain, like that whole, I would just love to know the thinking behind it. I'm just curious about how they arrived at, all right, so this is going to be a really good thing. This is going to give access to, breaking down barriers of money and giving people. And so that's fascinating to me. And so I would do that. Let's have a conversation.
Right on. So let me ask you this. Every day that you do what you do, what is the motivator? What is it that ultimately gets you going and doing what you do?
Day in and day out, it is the ability to experiment and try things out. Social media is never the same. There's always something different. And so it's being able to experiment against the goal. So it's like, all right, let me try this out. Let me have fun. Let me experiment. And did it meet my goal? So it's a bit of science and it's a bit of art, because you get to have fun, you get to play around, you get to be creative, make pretty colors, make pretty videos. But then there's also the data aspect of it, is like, is it driving the revenue or the business goals, the blah, 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 blah. So it's those two parts of the brain that I get to exercise and play around with, and that it's, for better or for worse, it is either going to work or it's not going to work, but I get to try, I get to experiment, and I get to explore.
So when you get to the end of that said day, how do you quantify a good day? How do you say that day worked for me?
I am trying to shift that. I am trying to actually shift that as we speak. So before, how I would quantify the day is, how productive was I? Did I get to check off all the things and do all the things on my list? And therefore, that's how I would weigh the day, if it was a worthy day or an unworthy day. And so, to the question that you asked earlier, how has the pandemic shifted how I relate to myself and my life? That's one of the shifts. And so I absolutely want to be productive, right? I'm a business owner, so that is always top of mind, is being productive and giving space to that. This is one, and it's I don't get do-overs, and I don't get to rewind it back. And so the time that I have is now. And so I don't want to wait until I retire to learn how to crochet or to grow plants or to have a rose garden, right? I can do that now. And so how I really look at weighing the day now is absolutely productivity. Yeah, did I get things done? Did I not get things done? Yeah, great. And I look at, need something today? Did I play a game? Did I check on my plants? Did I do things that would fulfill me as a person without having to qualify if it's been productive or contributing to the bottom line?
So let me ask you this. If you look back on your life right now and think about everything that you've done, what are you the proudest of?
I think I would say the people that I am privileged to have in my life, who they chose to be, who they choose to be, in spite of the easy road of okay, yeah, I see why you're that way, because that happened. Yeah, that's fair. But who they choose to be, in spite of all the circumstances and all the things. And I say that because then it reminds me that I get to choose, despite circumstances, despite things happening, I get to choose who I'm going to be. And so having people like that in my life, it gives me the opportunity to choose something different.
So when you think about art in your life and things that have motivated you, what was the album or book, or what was the piece that always motivated you?
I'm always on a quest to do better, whether that's produce better work or be a better human, to untangle and unlearn what needs to be unlearned, to deep dive into what I need to take on. So be a better human. And it's not a better human that is necessarily, quote unquote, fitting the mold of what it looks like to be a upstanding citizen. But it's being a better human for me is someone who is authentically themselves. And that takes work, and it takes effort for me because I know that I've picked up a lot of things along the way. Along my life, I picked up a lot of ways I should be, what I should be doing, what I shouldn't be doing, how I should act, how I shouldn't act, what I should wear, what I shouldn't wear. I picked up a lot of shoulds. And so I'm learning and disrobing myself of those shoulds is for me being a better human. Because when I show up authentically as my full self, it gives somebody else that permission to be their gift, to be who they are. And when the world is full of humans who are showing up, being who they are and sharing their gifts, that's the magic.
Well said. So what's been one of the best client responses, fan letters you've ever gotten?
Oh, so I think it's always around the clarity I bring. And so one time I was going through a strategy with somebody. I was onboarding somebody, created the strategy, going through the strategy, and the clarity that I brought to business and what they've been seeing in their mind's eye, but not able to necessarily articulate, it brought them to tears. And I was really touched because I was geeked about the client. I was like, oh my goodness, you're so cool. Let the world see how cool you are. But the fact that they were seen and that their vision was articulated, and that they were touched by me getting that was pretty cool. That was pretty cool.
So let's get to the heart of you. Everyone has a perception of you, an idea of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your clients, but ultimately you live your life. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think that I am somebody who is letting go of having to know how it's going to go down, to know how it's going to work out. It is a slow process, and I'm suspecting a process that I will be engaged with until the day I die. But I am somebody who's letting go, that I have to know how it's going to go and how it's going to work out, and leaning into trusting who I am, who I've surrounded myself by, and what I'm out here and committed to accomplishing in the world. And so leaning into the trust of self that's the person that I am. So yeah.
So I think we probably have sufficiently fired everybody up. For everyone out there that wants to hire you, learn more about you, where should they go?
You can always find me on W2Smarketing.com. If you're like, I don't really want to talk to people, I just want to go to a website, that's where you can go. But if you are up for a conversation, you're like, oh, let's have a good old convo, you can find me on Instagram at W2Smarketing. And so those are two best places to find me.
I love it. This has been wonderful. Thank you for being so open about your story. There's so many wonderful anecdotes. I appreciate it. Best of luck with everything.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.